Good evening, everyone, and welcome. And lovely to see so many from quite a broad geography. So, where are we? What are we doing tonight? I'm going to spend about half an hour talking to you about how to prepare for an interview. Now, some of you, and I can recognise some of the names in the chat already, which is fabulous. Some of you will have been around when we did the first part of this. Which was all about how to do the application. So I'll just run very, very quickly through a reminder of what we covered in that first session. Obviously, it's on YouTube. You can get it through all the normal CPD.me channels. And if you haven't seen it, I do urge you to go back. And they normally have an HR lead or the actual recruiting manager occasionally, but depending on how senior you are, sometimes the future line manager of the role as well. Whoever is there should be a contact. And again, if there's not, that's a bit of a red flag. Whoever the contact is, get in contact with them and try and have conversations. Ideally, try and do a visit. Now, depending on geography, that might be a limit. Depending on whether or not we're back in a pandemic, that might be a limit. But try as reasonably as possible to go and do a visit. And again, the other thing I mentioned that adverts might not, well, in fact, they don't have to. Certainly in our legal jurisdiction here in the UK, they might not even shortlist you unless you get in contact, and they don't have to be honest about that. They may only shortlist people who are getting in contact and are doing a visit, and they may want to pre-screen people very, very gently in that way. It is something that I think can be very, very effective. So don't be excluded just because you didn't put some effort in. If you've gone to all the effort that we talked about in that preparation webinar that we previously did, if you've done all of that prep, do the little bit that's going to get you over that final mile and going to get you that shortlisting. Okay, now shortlisting process, as I went through last time, if you meet the person specification, and listen to the last webinar to understand the difference between a job description, a job title, and a person spec. I went through that in some detail. If you meet the person spec, and unless you are in a cast of thousands, you should be getting shortlisted. If you believe that you meet the person spec and you haven't been shortlisted, absolutely, definitely try and find out why. And if it may be because you're in a cast of thousands, and they've only had capacity to interview, let's say, a dozen people, and you were, number 30, then that's just unlucky. So what we're going to come to now is that phase between submitting your application, doing some diligence, hopefully doing a visit, and getting that shortlist. And once you've been shortlisted and you've been invited for interview, and you've had that adrenaline surge from reading that email or receiving that telephone call, however it's communicated, what are you going to do? So what you're going to do is you're going to go back. Was 85% occluded. They stuck a balloon in it, and the chap or the chapess, normally chap, got discharged 5 days later from CCU for a happy life. Outstanding. So to talk about the result, if it's a what would you do, it would be you would talk about how you would measure the efficacy of all the previous things you've talked about. How would you measure your results? What would the measurable outcome be? And that's basically a mini version of the task that you've already given, and you can restate that. So if you're giving hypothetical answers, if you've been asked to give a hypothetical answer, your T and your R are often quite similar, and they kind of should be, again, for that consistency and congruence. This is the task, and this is the measurable. So for people working in quantitative areas, I talk about numbers. This can be quite easy. If the task is to improve the performance of something by improve the efficiency of something by 10%, which, by the way, is enormous improvement in efficiency in a complex system. 0.1% would be more reasonable. But anyway, whatever the number is, and you say, and then we would use the 10% improvement as our key performance indicator for that. And all of a sudden, you're then showing an awareness, not just of getting the job done, but bringing the team with you, but then also that governance piece, because as you go up the slippery slope of promotion, increasingly you are aware that you're in an organization that needs to measure and demonstrate how it does things. And we're all aware of organizations with targets. And for example, if you work in healthcare, nobody doesn't know about the 4-hour ED target that's been thrown in and out about 5 million times in the last 10 years. That's all fine. It's kind of a benchmark. It has its uses. It's like anything. It's got strengths and weaknesses, but that might be your benchmark. Your benchmark might be to improve the performance of the ED by 2% in 6 months against the 4-hour target, for which there are a million confounding reasons. So that's your start. So go through that again. So it's situation. So that's you restating the question. Task, that's you demonstrating you can analyze the question and condense it down into this is actually what's needed in this situation. And then actions, what you're going to do about it. And remember being consistent and congruent and authentic and true to your own values, and bringing the rest of the team along with you. Don't be the Luke Skywalker, be the Yoda. Don't be the hero, be the guide, be the person that supports the rest of the team. One of the talks I talk about is servant leadership, and the idea that a leader is a logistical function to support the people doing the actual work, which are the people down on the shop floor, be it band 4 clinicians, be it people punching widgets in factories, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The leaders are there to provide service and function. So the question the leader should be asking is, what can I do to support you in completing your role today, tomorrow, next week, 6 months' time? Okay, so you're going to do situation, task, actions, and then results, which is either what did happen or how you would measure it, or a combination of both. Okay, so that's the kind of what. Let's do a little bit of the how. Some of you will probably seen me talk about box breathing in the past. Again, I'm not going to sit here and Armani suit and a £20,000 Rolex on your wrist. Is that congruent? Is that consistent? Is it authentic? Quite frankly, if you've got that sort of money splashing around, you're probably not working in healthcare, and you're probably working in banking. But if you're working in banking, they almost certainly all be wearing dark suits and ties and Rolexes. So understand the context in which the interview is going to take place, what the panel will be wearing, and therefore what they would reasonably expect you to, because this isn't the time to be massive creative unless you're applying for a creative job. So understand your audience, understand what the expectations are. If in doubt, ask. Don't be afraid to ask. Okay, obviously before the interview. Right, so what we've gone through there, we've gone through a flash through reminder of how you get the interview in the first place. Then we've talked about how you prep for the interview. Essentially, you're going to do some analysis on finding some questions. You're then going to practice and rehearse some answers. We talked about the STAR technique. We talked about breathing. We talked about pausing and smiling and saying thank you. We talked about preparing some questions to have to hand at the end. And that is me, as they say in the military, rounds complete.